Host, are you sure you want to retract all of Ethan Hawthorne's scientific achievements? You have currently invested 50,000 achievement points. If you retract them, the points will not be refunded. In the late 1970s hospital, looking at the outdated medical equipment and the wounds on my body, I was finally certain of it. I had been reborn. Facing the system's question, I nodded without hesitation. I'm sure. Retraction confirmed. As Ethan Hawthorne has already benefited from the system's inspiration, retracting it now will cause a backlash. It is estimated that within 8 days, he will lose his job at the Military Research Institute. I zoned out for a moment upon hearing this. Then I chuckled softly. Good. A nurse walked in. Claire Sterling, you have a mild concussion, fractured rib cartilage, and multiple scrapes all over your body. Where's your family? I glanced around. Everyone else had family members by their side. Only my bedside was empty. I gave a bitter smile. On this day in my past life, I was mugged just like this. I'd rather be beaten than let go of my purse. It was full of cash that could be converted into achievement points. But what about Ethan? He was at home, settling in his adopted sister, Sylvia, the one who had saved his life and her son. When he heard I was injured and in the hospital, he didn't think much of it. He certainly didn't come to see me. This time, starting over, I had no expectations. I collected my own medicine, and against the nurse's advice to get some proper bed rest for a few days, I limped my way home. As I reached the front door, I heard a sweet and gentle voice from inside. Ethan, will your wife be okay with me staying here? Before Ethan could speak, my mother-in-law Martha's sharp voice cut in. What does she know? That lazy sod runs around all day instead of serving me and Ethan. Who knows what shady business she's up to? Don't you worry, Sylvia. She doesn't call the shots in this house. Then I'll be troubling you and Ethan, Mrs. Hawthorne. Throughout the exchange, Ethan didn't say a word to contradict them. I pushed the door open. All 4 people inside, including the woman's child, turned to look at me. Their sudden stares made me feel like I was the intruder. The boy was kicking a block of wood like a ball. The next second, he kicked it high, and the block flew up, slamming into my injured shoulder. I let out a muffled groan. Sylvia immediately feigned concern, scolding the child. Gavin, Auntie Claire is going to get mad and spank you. Apologize to her right now. It's fine. He's just a kid. He doesn't know any better. Ethan stopped her, then turned to me. Why are you back so late? His tone was tinged with complaint. Anyway, this is Sylvia Vance, the one who saved my life. I've adopted her as my sister. She's going through a hard time and needs to stay with us for a while. I need you to take good care of her and her son. It was already getting dark. I stood in the dim doorway, watching him silently for a moment before saying, okay. The words Ethan was about to say died in his throat. He was stunned, not expecting me to agree so readily without a single fuss. Also, my voice seemed strangely flat today. Was it his imagination? I didn't look at them, clutching my shoulder where the block had struck, and went straight to my room. Look at her, looking like death warmed over. So unlucky, I shut the door, blocking out my mother-in-law's cursing. I took a moment to steady my emotions. I originally fell in love with Ethan for his intellect. He was a high-level talent at the Research Institute, yet he was willing to stop and fix a bicycle for a country girl whose bike had broken down on her way back from the market. The bike was borrowed, and I was frantic. Even his assistant urged him, Professor Hawthorne, we're running late. Don't waste your time. But he had said, how is helping someone in need a waste of time? From then on, his image was deeply ingrained in my heart. So much so that, when the system asked me what I wanted to redeem my achievement points for, I chose to redeem them for Ethan's research breakthroughs without a second thought. By then, I had already married him, just as I'd wished. Ethan was busy with his work at the Institute day in and day out, often frowning over difficult problems. I saw it all. While I managed the household for him, I was also waking up early and working late to run my own small business. With the achievement points earned from my little bakery, I redeemed countless flashes of inspiration for him, helping him achieve a meteoric rise to become the deputy director at a young age. This time, I was taking back everything I had given him. Without me playing the role of his housekeeper and managing his family, I wished him and Sylvia all the happiness in the world, hoping they'd finally get together sooner rather than later. As for me, Claire Sterling, I was done with him for this lifetime. That evening, I was applying ointment to my wounds when there was a knock on the door. Ethan came in. He was often so busy with work that he'd be away for days at a time, so we slept in separate rooms. Now that Sylvia was here, he had to share a room with me. Seeing the kerosene lamp lit in the room, Ethan frowned slightly. "Be careful with that. Don't waste the kerosene, or Mom will start nagging you again." My hand paused. A sad smile touched my lips. Before, when I loved him with all my heart, I would have thought this was his way of showing concern. But now, all I heard was him accusing me of being wasteful, implying I wasn't worthy of using something as good as a kerosene lamp. The dim yellow light illuminated my face, revealing a few faint bruises. Ethan finally saw what I was doing. Only then did he remember to ask, "Someone told me you were injured today. What happened?" I replied calmly, "Some thugs tried to rob me." I didn't expect that his first reaction would be to treat it as some kind of proof. "I told you, there are a lot of hooligans out there. A woman like you, out and about all day, it's no wonder you attract trouble." He rubbed his temples, looking weary and exasperated. "Do you have any idea what's been happening at the Institute lately, how busy I am? Can't you be a little more understanding? The best support you could give me is to just stay home and stay out of trouble." My breathing quickened. I wanted so badly to say, "Without me, do you think you could have become the deputy director?" But seeing the disdain in his eyes, I fell silent again. There were some things he would never know, and now there was no need for him to. During the night, every time I turned over, I would bump against a wound. I couldn't help but make some noise, which woke Ethan up. After tossing and turning for a while, he couldn't hold back anymore. "I have a very important experiment tomorrow. Why do you keep fidgeting like that?" I brushed against another injury and hissed in pain. Ethan, annoyed, immediately grabbed his blanket and left the room. The next morning, I was woken by the sound of my mother-in-law shouting. She threw open the door, ripped the blanket off me, and pointed to a pile of clothes outside. How did my family end up with such a lazy wife? The sun is high in the sky and you're still sleeping. Do you expect me to wash these clothes? I hadn't slept well, and my wounds hurt even more after a day. "Mom, I'm injured. I can't wash clothes," I said. But my mother-in-law wouldn't listen. Just then, Ethan walked in. She immediately began to complain to him. "Your wife doesn't have a proper job, just runs around all day with that little business of hers. Now she's leaving all the housework for an old woman like me. What's the use of keeping a freeloader who just leeches off of us?" Ethan didn't rush to speak. He first handed me something. I took it and saw that it was a small bottle of pain-relieving ointment. My heart stirred. Did Ethan go out this morning specifically to buy this for me? If only Ethan could always be this good to me, how wonderful would that be? He was the man I had loved so deeply. What did I do so wrong that he had to divorce me? "Claire, it was my fault for not coming to the hospital to get you yesterday. I went out and bought this for you today. Apply it well and get better soon." He paused. "As for the clothes, your hands aren't injured, so maybe you can wash them this afternoon when you're feeling better. We can't have Mom doing your chores. Also, Sylvia twisted her wrist this morning, so you can help her with her laundry too." Hearing that last part, the warmth that had just begun to creep into my heart turned to ice. So, Mrs. Hawthorne couldn't do chores for her, but I could do them for Sylvia. "Ethan, you bought 2 bottles of this." Sylvia walked over just then. Sensing my gaze, she smiled sheepishly. "I mentioned this morning that I twisted my wrist, and Ethan immediately went out to buy this for me. Honestly, he's so good to me, I don't even know how I'll ever repay him." "Don't talk about repaying. If you hadn't saved me during that snowstorm last year, I would have frozen to death on the road." They exchanged a look and both lowered their heads. I laughed at myself. So, this rare moment of concern was just an afterthought while he was buying medicine for Sylvia. Me being beaten by several thugs in an alley was less important than Sylvia twisting her wrist. Seeing the blush on their faces, I found the sight jarring. I asked Ethan a single question. "Where did you sleep last night?" Actually, I had already guessed the answer. Sure enough, Ethan's expression changed. He stammered. I watched him, a final trace of bitterness lingering in my heart. He had started sleeping in the same room as Sylvia this early. To put it bluntly, we were still husband and wife. Seeing Ethan's predicament, Sylvia frowned and said disapprovingly, "Claire, I have to say something about this. How could you kick Ethan out of the room in the middle of the night?" If I hadn't woken up and seen him and let him stay in my room for a bit, he probably would have caught a cold. What? You kicked Ethan out? My mother-in-law flew into a rage. Claire, you've really got some nerve. We give you a roof over your head, food to eat, and clothes to wear, and you kick the head of the household out. You're nothing but a shrew. Ethan opened his mouth, but in the end, said nothing to defend me. I was completely disappointed. If Sylvia were being yelled at by his mother like this, would he still stand by and do nothing? My voice was weak. Mom, just for a few days, can't you help us with the laundry? The neighbors saw me coming back from the hospital yesterday. If I go to the communal laundry area today, what will people think of Ethan? Your hands aren't broken, why can't you wash them? Mrs. Hawthorne immediately retorted, but Ethan stopped her. He thought for a moment. Mom, Claire has a point. Maybe you can just put up with it for a few days. We don't want people thinking we abuse our daughter-in-law. He added in a lower voice, besides, I'm up for a promotion soon. We need to be careful about our family's reputation. That finally shut her up. She muttered about how demanding his superiors were. A sneer formed in my heart. Ethan, in this life, you can forget about getting that promotion so easily. Without my system secretly helping him, he would never have been able to beat others to those research breakthroughs. Ethan's work was indeed busy. He didn't come home for 3 consecutive days. When he finally returned, Sylvia deliberately moved a stool over to where I was sitting, took out a needle and thread, and smiled. Claire, thank you for letting me stay here. How about I knit you a pair of gloves? But after just a few moments, she let out a hiss, having pricked her finger. Ethan, who had been eating, immediately rushed over anxiously to check on her. He took out a handkerchief and carefully wiped away the bead of blood on her finger. I'm so clumsy, I was just trying to make something for Claire and, at Sylvia's aggrieved tone, Ethan turned to me, his voice filled with anger. Claire, what kind of host are you? Sylvia is not here to do chores for you. Making her knit things for you, do you even deserve it? Ethan, don't say that. I just saw that Claire's hands were all rough, so I wanted to make a pair of gloves for her. Ethan gently rubbed Sylvia's hand, his tone helpless. You're just too kind. Your sister-in-law is from the countryside. Her hands are naturally rough. You're not used to manual labor, so there's no need to torture yourself like this. My gaze fell on Sylvia's delicate, smooth hands, a single needle prick, and Ethan was beside himself with worry. I looked down at my own hands, rough and deformed from years of hard work. He knew it was torturous manual labor, but in his eyes, it was just what a country bumpkin like me was supposed to do. Come on, I don't have to go to the institute today. I'll take you to the department store to buy some hand cream. Really? Oh, Ethan, you're so good to me. Sylvia happily left with Ethan. Before she walked out, she shot me a triumphant look. I lowered my eyes, showing no reaction. Fine. Since he had no pity for a country girl like me, then once the system rebooted after the divorce, I would go somewhere else and start over. From now on, the calloused hands, the hard work, the achievement points I earned, they would all be for myself. With them gone, only Gavin and my mother-in-law were left in the house. Gavin was a real brat. Seeing me idle, he'd take the opportunity to throw stones at me when I wasn't looking. The little rascal was sturdy and surprisingly strong. The stones hurt when they hit. I tried to scare him, tossing a stone back so it landed near his feet. Stay away from me, or I'll have the police come and get you. Gavin burst into tears. Bad woman, you're a bad woman who took our house. I don't want to be taken away. What's wrong? My mother-in-law came out and immediately shielded him. Oh, my sweet grandson, why are you crying your little heart out? She then turned on me, calling me a rotten-hearted thing. Picking on a small child. You're not eating at my family's table for lunch, it was always this. The food in the house was portioned out by her. Ethan's bowl was always full to the brim. Hers was second. The little that was left over was for me. She always said I didn't have a job and didn't need to eat so much, often finding excuses to cut my rations. Sometimes, when I was starving, I'd tighten my belt and eat the leftover scraps from the bakery. As for the whole, perfect pastries, I couldn't bear to eat them. They were for selling. In the 3 years of our marriage, she had constantly called me a barren hen who couldn't lay eggs. But I was malnourished and thin, and Ethan rarely spent the night with me. It would have been a miracle if I'd gotten pregnant. What I found strange was why she was so generous to Sylvia and her son. Did she assume Ethan would marry Sylvia eventually, making Sylvia's son her own grandson? At noon, my mother-in-law called me to cook. When I didn't move, she launched into another tirade. By this time, Ethan and Sylvia were back. Sylvia looked completely refreshed, with a new set of clothes from head to toe, even new shoes. They gathered in the living room, but no one called me to eat. My body was already used to hunger, and my mind was troubled. I ended up just lying on the bed, feeling sick, and drifted off to sleep. In a daze, I thought I heard voices. The sound was cloying, like a mix of honey and sour plums, intimate, yet laced with jealousy. "Ethan, when are you going to divorce her? You know, after that snowy night, Gavin is your child, it's not right for things to be like this, you know." "I know, Sylvia, don't worry. The Institute is really busy right now. As soon as my work stabilizes, I'll talk to her." I woke up with a start. I was greeted by a sound that would make anyone blush. It slowly dawned on me that what I heard wasn't a dream. It was really Ethan and Sylvia talking. Just a wall away, they were being intimate without a care in the world. My hands trembled as I covered my mouth, my pupils quivering in disbelief. This was something I never knew, not even in my past life, so Gavin was actually Sylvia and Ethan's child. No wonder my mother-in-law had accepted another family's child so easily. I thought she was just desperate for a grandson because she considered me useless. It turned out that I was the only one who had been kept in the dark. How ridiculous. In my last life, I had become pregnant a few months later, but I miscarried after washing the entire family's laundry in the dead of winter. I was sent to the hospital, where I received the devastating news. Ethan, who had become the director by then, chose that moment to ask for a divorce. I thought he was angry that I hadn't protected our child, and I begged him to give me another chance. "I promise I'll take care of myself and give the family another healthy baby." But he refused me heartlessly. "There's no need. Gavin is enough for me. He brought me good luck. I became the director shortly after he arrived. It means we're meant to be." I couldn't explain my suffering, lying on the hard, cold bed planks without even a thick blanket. If I had known this would happen, I would never have let my heart be thrown to the dogs giving him a child. Ethan didn't deserve it. After I had calmed down, Ethan pushed the door open and came in. Seeing me lying in bed, he frowned slightly. "Claire, do you just lie around like this all day? I was feeling much better, but your mom made me feed the chickens, and I threw out my back again." Hearing how clear my voice was, Ethan paused, a hint of guilt in his eyes. "You weren't asleep just now. Did you hear anything?" "I did." Ethan's heart leaped into his throat. "What?" "I heard you push the door open." He finally let out a breath of relief, then frowned again, as if feeling he'd been too careless. Exposing things to me now would be unwise. He cleared his throat and brought up another matter. "You and Sylvia should switch rooms." Winter was coming. Sylvia's room faced the wind, and with a window that didn't shut properly, it would be cold all the time. This room, however, was not only warmer but also had a heated platform bed. The reason Ethan gave was, "Sylvia saved my life. She's frail and can't be exposed to the wind. It's only right that the family gives her the best room." I asked with a ghost of a smile, "So after we switch, which room will you be sleeping in?" Ethan froze, then reacted with suppressed anger. "What are you talking about? I'll be busy, sleeping at the Institute, Claire. Don't be so malicious. She's a widow. Gossip can be vicious. Are you trying to ruin her reputation and drive her to her death?" I watched Ethan grow flustered and exasperated, even though I hadn't said much. An adopted sister. An adopted sister who even has a child with him? How ironic. "All right, that's enough. The matter is settled." Ethan made the final decision. Just then, Gavin ran in. It seemed his mother had already told him the news. He climbed onto my bed and started jumping up and down. "Yay, we're switching rooms, we're switching rooms." The brat was heavy, and his jumps even landed on my hand. I winced and pulled my hand back, about to scold him, when Ethan scooped him up with the adoring eyes of a doting father. "That's right. Once we move here, Gavin and Mommy won't be cold this winter. Are you happy?" Sylvia also appeared, smiling, and said apologetically, "I'm sorry, Claire. I didn't want to trouble you by switching rooms. It's just that as winter gets closer, this weak body of mine acts up, and Ethan was just worried about me." The three of them looked like a happy family, making me feel completely out of place. "Fine, you can have it." I had no intention of arguing further. I remembered that in my past life, around this time, a small earthquake had struck the city. The supposedly sturdy East Room had partially collapsed. I was sleeping inside and was nearly crushed. Since Sylvia wanted it so badly this time, she could have it. He was a little surprised that I agreed so readily. A feeling, identical to the one he'd had the other day, surfaced in his heart. Claire seemed to have changed recently, but it didn't seem like a bad change, so he didn't dwell on it. In fact, he felt a pang of guilt that I had agreed so quickly. "Don't worry, I won't let you freeze. I'll bring you a new, thick blanket." There was even a hint of sincerity in Ethan's eyes, but I just lowered my gaze and hummed in agreement. The next morning, I found some time to go to my shop. Host, confirm property reclamation? Yes. The shop was an early investment from the system. Now that I was leaving, it was time to say goodbye to it as well. While I was out, I went to the station and bought a ticket for a train leaving in 3 days. Brighton City, a place I had only heard of but never visited. It would soon be designated an economic development zone, and its economy would skyrocket. It would be the starting point of my new life. What I didn't see was that after I left the shop, a figure began to follow me. When I got home, I didn't understand what was happening. Sylvia was sitting in the living room with red, tear-filled eyes. Ethan was holding a red scarf, his expression cold. The moment he saw me, he began his interrogation. "Claire, why did you steal the scarf I bought for Sylvia?" I froze for a second, my expression turning indifferent. "I didn't." Disbelief was written all over Ethan's face. "It was found in your cabinet. Who else could it be? Sylvia and Gavin are a widow and her orphan son. I just bought her a few things and you steal them. Are you that desperate for a scarf?" How shameful, the deep disgust in his eyes stung me. I turned and went into the room to pack my things. "What are you doing?" Ethan demanded, following me. Seeing me efficiently packing, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. "Where are you going?" I didn't have many belongings, so it didn't take long. I smiled. "To the West Room. Weren't you the ones who told me to move?" For some reason, Ethan let out a sigh of relief. Then his eyes fell on my meager luggage. 2 sets of patched clothes, a piece of cloth that served as a towel, a wooden comb, some toiletries, and a thin blanket. That was it. He had asked if I was that desperate for a scarf. Wasn't I? Forget a scarf. Did I even have a single decent piece of clothing? When I first married into the Hawthorne family, I did have new clothes. But they were either taken by my mother-in-law to give to her family or torn apart and remade into pillowcases for her. What woman doesn't want to look nice? But back then, when he complained that I looked drab and plain, all I could do was clutch the hem of my clothes and smile. It's easier to work in these. I never complained, so he never noticed my grievances. I used to comfort myself, thinking Ethan's heart was meant for science, for the people. But now, it seemed he just couldn't be bothered to spare a thought for me. "Is Claire home?" A woman's voice called from the yard. It was the seamstress, and she was holding a thick military coat. The woman was all smiles. "Honey, the coat you ordered for your man is ready. I used all new cotton. I guarantee it's warm." I was stunned. It seemed this was the coat I had asked the seamstress to make last week. That was before I was reborn. Now, it seemed, it was no longer needed. Ethan stared at the coat for a moment, then looked back at my pile of shabby luggage. A strange feeling churned inside him. He felt a bit embarrassed. "Claire, I wasn't trying to blame you. It's just that things have been difficult at the lab these past few days, and I was a bit harsh. If you need anything in the future, you can just tell me, can't you?" There is no future, I thought to myself. It will all be over soon. At this point, Sylvia made a strategic retreat. "Ethan, even though the scarf was found in Claire's room, it doesn't necessarily mean she stole it. Maybe Gavin was being mischievous and put it there. No wonder Claire is angry if you misunderstand her like this." Sylvia's eyes darted around. It was she who had orchestrated this whole thing from the beginning. Ethan couldn't bring himself to say anything harsh to her, so he tried to smooth things over. "All right, it was nothing. You have that shop, right? Why don't you let Sylvia use it to open a clothing store? You can help her out, and if you dress a little better and you two are together, I won't have to worry about your safety." Just like that, with a few words, he decided my future. My eyes widened slightly. So that's what today was about. They were after my shop. Sylvia didn't look surprised at all. She must have set her sights on the shop and then convinced Ethan. "I can't. The lease was up and the landlord took it back." "Impossible. The neighbors all said you've been open for almost a year. How could the lease just be up? The rental agreement is probably in your room somewhere." Sylvia said anxiously, storming into the West room and rummaging through my luggage, making a mess. "What are you doing?" I followed her in to stop her, but she shoved me hard. My waist slammed against the corner of a table. A searing pain shot through me, and I couldn't move for a long moment. Sylvia froze, suddenly looking scared. Seeing Ethan about to come in, she slammed her head against a cabinet and shrieked. "Claire, don't hit me." Ethan entered to see a red mark on Sylvia's forehead. His protective instincts immediately took over, and his gaze toward me turned ice cold. "You shrew, who gave you permission to hurt her? Sylvia is my savior. Harming her is the same as harming me." My hand trembled as I clutched my waist, taking a sharp breath. Cold sweat beaded on my forehead, but Ethan only had eyes for Sylvia. "Fine. If she's that important to you, let's get a divorce." Ethan's momentum stopped dead. His face was a mask of disbelief. He seemed to laugh, as if finding my suggestion foolish. "Claire, you want a divorce. You'll be the one to regret it." With that, he helped Sylvia up to treat her wound. He paid no mind to my talk of divorce. In his eyes, even for city folk, divorce was a scandal. How could a country girl like me possibly have that kind of courage? If anyone was going to bring it up, it should be him. Right now, my waist hurt so much that tears streamed down my face, but I was smiling. My gaze fell on the calendar on the wall. The last day. Tomorrow, the news of Ethan's dismissal from the institute would probably arrive. Without the system's help, Ethan might still be a senior researcher, but he would never have made it to the position of director. Now, he was just giving back what I had given him. Because of his mother's objections, we had never officially registered our marriage. Once I left tomorrow, I would easily sever all ties with him and the Hawthorne family. That night, I slept fitfully. Ethan didn't return to the institute, but he didn't spend the night in my room either. It wasn't hard to guess where he went, but for me, it was a welcome peace. In the middle of the night, a heavy object fell beside my bed with a loud crash. I woke with a start, my face covered in fine dust. The entire room was shaking. It was the earthquake from my past life. But something was wrong. I had switched rooms. Why was the west room collapsing? The shaking sent objects flying. I tried to escape, but I couldn't even stand steady and was nearly hit. In a critical moment, I scrambled under the bed. A quick glance revealed that a large chunk of the corner wall in the west room had been dug out. I suddenly remembered Gavin bringing several older kids over to play a few days ago. When they saw me, they had raised their shovels and chanted, "Bad woman live in a broken house." I hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now it all made sense. The earthen house was old and in disrepair. The children knew I would be staying in the west room, so they and their friends had widened what was originally a mouse hole. And then the earthquake hit. The sounds of neighbors shouting and crying for help filled the air. With a final roar, the west room collapsed completely. "Ethan, Gavin is terrified. Quick, we have to get him to the hospital." Ethan was rushing out, but when he saw the collapsed west room, he stopped dead in his tracks. Claire is still in there," he barely hesitated, about to put the child down and rush to save me. But Sylvia grabbed him. "Ethan, I'm so scared. If anything happens to Gavin, I don't want to live anymore," she cried, tears streaming down her face. Ethan was torn. Finally, with a turn, he headed for the hospital. He left only a single sentence behind. "Claire, don't be scared, I'll get the neighbors to help you." In the end, the neighbors never came. Because when my mother-in-law was asked, she said, "The house? There's no one left in the house." I spent half the night terrified in the narrow space under the bed, shivering from the cold. Finally, I whispered, "System?" When Ethan returned home the next day, all he found was that I was gone without a trace. And a colleague who hadn't seen him at work had brought him a notice. A letter of dismissal. Ethan thought he must be reading it wrong. How is this possible? I'm the deputy director. The institute can't function without me. Seeing Ethan's unstable state, the employee quickly made his exit. Faced with the ruined, empty house and this letter of dismissal, Ethan felt as if a crucial part of him had been carved out and had vanished along with me. 4 years later, in Brighton City, the Radiance Inc. Excellence and New Horizons business conference was underway in the city center. It brought together business people from all over the country. Everyone was full of energy and optimism, reflecting the booming economy. A few businessmen were quietly discussing a company called Radiance Inc. I heard the boss is a woman. In just 4 years, she's built a corporation that covers everything from fashion and jewelry to cosmetics and even film investment. You have to be impressed. I doubt even a man could have done it that quickly. Miss Sterling is truly remarkable. Sterling, a female boss. In a corner, a man in a black structured suit suddenly spoke up, his voice urgent, interrupting their conversation. "Excuse me, what is that Miss Sterling's full name?" The men were a little unsure. "We only know her last name is Sterling. We're not that familiar with her. Everyone seems to call her by her English name, Manda, I think." Hearing this, Ethan let out a self-deprecating laugh. Yes, it was Ethan Hawthorne. After the earthquake, Claire had vanished without a trace. Only then did he realize how much he cared for her. After she disappeared, he would pick up his research notes but couldn't write a single word. His mind was completely blank when it came to his work. Losing someone you love, it turned out, was like losing a gift. She was far more important than he had ever imagined. Since then, he had followed others into business. The once brilliant research talent, who had relied on his mind, now had to put on a smile and bow and scrape. He learned to be smooth, to not offend anyone. Riding the wave of the times, he had managed to make a name for himself. He had gone through countless hardships to get to where he was, to earn a seat at this conference. Claire, a woman with little education, how could she possibly have become a business owner too? He was getting worked up just hearing that last name. He was truly losing his mind. Or maybe it was guilt. Over the years, he often found himself thinking about the little moments he had shared with Claire. The more he thought, the more he felt he had wronged her, and the more he wanted to find her. But in the vast sea of people, there had been no news of her. Next, please welcome our successful female entrepreneur, the chairwoman of Radiance Inc., Miss Manda Sterling, to give a speech. The hall erupted in thunderous applause. "I can't believe Miss Manda Sterling is here today. Seeing is believing. I've been curious for a long time what this modern-day Iron Lady looks like." Amidst the eager anticipation, a woman walked calmly onto the stage. She wore an elegant and sophisticated navy blue jacket over an exquisite silk dress. Around her neck, a limited-edition pearl necklace, crafted by Radiance's top designer, sparkled brilliantly. But even it couldn't outshine its owner. She smiled faintly, exuding an intense confidence and radiance. "Hello everyone, I am Manda. Thank you for the invitation. I will say a few words on behalf of Radiance Inc." The sound from the microphone drowned out the sharp, grating sound of a chair scraping the floor. The moment he saw the woman on stage, Ethan had uncontrollably gripped the armrests of his chair, nearly jumping to his feet. He stared, his eyes wide with disbelief. Claire, it was her, the Miss Sterling of Radiance Inc. Was really his ex-wife, Claire, whom he had been searching for 4 years. Ethan watched the woman on stage as if in a dream. He couldn't tear his eyes away. She had changed so much. Beautiful, slim, she looked like a model who had just stepped out of a fashion magazine. But it was her aura that had undergone a complete transformation. The country wife who had always deferred to him was now poised and confident, able to speak eloquently about business development in front of such a large crowd. Every word was meaningful, and she showed no sign of stage fright. Even he might not have been able to do that. Ethan grew confused. Was he dreaming? Was the person before him really the Claire from the countryside? How had she changed so drastically? As soon as the conference ended, Ethan was desperate to catch up to her. But she was surrounded by several people. They were the big bosses he had been hoping to flatter. But now, these bosses were the ones smiling obsequiously at Claire, seeking business advice and partnership opportunities. Ethan hesitated, suddenly reluctant to approach. The feeling of unfamiliarity with Claire grew stronger. Suddenly, someone took his arm. It was Sylvia, looking almost unchanged, still as innocent as before. She said gently, "Your meeting is finally over. I've been waiting outside for you for so long. If you have time today, shall we go pick up Gavin from school together?" Ethan was in a daze and didn't answer immediately. Sensing something was wrong, Sylvia followed his gaze. She gasped in shock. "Claire?" Her voice was so abrupt that not only Claire but also the business owners around her heard it. Ethan held his breath. He watched as that person slowly turned her head. Their eyes met. One heart pounded like a drum, the other was as calm as a gentle breeze. Claire ignored them and continued to chat and laugh with the people around her. But Sylvia pulled Ethan directly over to them, interrupting the conversation. Claire. Long time no see. Which one of these men is your husband? She scanned the group. The men around Claire were all older. A sense of satisfaction bloomed within her, extinguishing the jealousy she had felt at the first sight of Claire's elegant and luxurious attire. Ethan frowned and tugged at her, but Sylvia didn't notice. Everyone here was a sly old fox. Before Claire could speak, one of the bosses, annoyed by Sylvia's thinly veiled superiority, chuckled. We could never hope to be worthy of Miss Sterling. But you, young lady, seem to be an old acquaintance. I assume you're just as outstanding as our Iron Lady here. However, this conference requires formal attire. You're dressed so colorfully. Don't tell me you weren't even invited. You? Ethan stopped Sylvia before she could retort, giving her a sharp look. We apologize for the intrusion. We were just so excited to see a familiar face. Please forgive us. I apologize to you all on her behalf. After he spoke, he finally turned to Claire and slowly called her name. Claire! The tremor in his voice held a world of longing. Claire gently smoothed her sleeve. Her gaze was direct and unwavering. I'm sorry, but not everyone from the past can be called an acquaintance. With that, she turned and walked away in her elegant high heels. Ethan was left standing there, utterly lost, reunited after so many years. She was like a different person, elegant, mysterious, and captivating. The Claire who was once content to cook and clean for him had truly changed. She had become the moon, high and unattainable, and now it was his turn to look up to her. Inside the office building, Claire finished her paperwork. She gently rubbed her wrists. She hadn't expected to see Ethan today. How did she feel? No love, no hate, he was just a stranger. On the day she was trapped by the earthquake, she had the system help her get out. After the aftershocks subsided, she found a nearby guest house to rest. From the second-floor window, she could see the Hawthorns' yard. She watched Ethan's confusion and rage after being fired, watched him disregard the danger, and try to dig her out of the rubble. Her heart was calm. She realized that truly letting go of someone meant that no matter what emotions they displayed, they couldn't affect you in the slightest. Her world was in Brighton City, a place teeming with opportunities. With the system's help, in just 4 years, she had achieved what many couldn't in a lifetime. She had single-handedly built a business empire that belonged entirely to Claire Sterling. This was her true rebirth. There was a knock on the office door. Claire's secretary entered. Ma'am, Mr. Smith is here for his appointment. Good, I'll be right there. When she reached the meeting room, Leo Smith stood up as soon as he saw her, offering a gentlemanly hand. Hey, Amanda, I came to see you. Are you happy to see me? Of course, Claire smiled. Mr. Smith was actually an enthusiastic young man of mixed heritage. They had met while hiking in a national park. Although Leo was of mixed race, he had grown up abroad and his local language skills were poor. He didn't know how to ask passersby for help when he ran into trouble. Fortunately, he met Claire. Knowing this was an era of rapid global expansion, how could she not have unlocked English with the system? She thought it was just a small favor. But it turned out Leo Smith was an important foreign guest, invited by the Chamber of Commerce. Radiance Inc. S fashion and jewelry designs were already intended for the international market and had generated significant foreign exchange. A small favor had led to another collaboration, and the partner was a polite, gentlemanly, and handsome man. Claire was in a good mood. After the meeting, she personally escorted Leo out of the building. She didn't expect that as soon as she turned around, Ethan would be standing not far away, hesitating, unsure whether to step forward or back. He had come directly to her company to find her. How would she treat him? Claire pretended not to see him and turned to go back inside without a second thought. That's when Ethan rushed to stop her. The first words out of his mouth were, "Claire, since when do you speak English?" Claire pulled her hand away. "That's none of your business, is it, mister?" "Hawthorne," she said coldly. Ethan looked annoyed at his own clumsiness. His lips moved. "Claire, back then I was wrong, but on the day of the earthquake I did call for help. I called for people to save you." He wanted to apologize, but Claire had no patience to listen. "Since you know you were wrong, then stay away from me. The farther, the better. Otherwise, one of these days, on a whim, I might decide to deal with you, and it would be very easy." She just didn't have the time to deal with him now. But that didn't mean she wouldn't collect some interest when she had the chance. She hoped Ethan would be sensible enough to understand. After retrieving her bag from her office and confirming the documents inside were in order, Claire headed straight to the home of an official she knew, Director Thompson. Recently, the government had been planning to establish economic development zones in various places, inviting outstanding enterprises and technical personnel to set up shop. Claire, of course, couldn't miss this opportunity. Coincidentally, the director in charge of this project was an old acquaintance. When she arrived at his house, his wife, Helen, warmly welcomed her in. "Claire, you're here, come in, stay for dinner tonight." "Then I won't be polite, thank you, Helen," Claire replied sweetly. After their discussion, she found Helen about to head out. "Claire, you can't leave after we're done. I'm going to the elementary school to pick up my daughter. Wait for me to get back for dinner." The Thompsons had a daughter in the 3rd grade. She was adorable and always called Claire Auntie Claire. Claire thought it was a perfect idea. She had time, so she could go with Helen to pick up the little one. At the entrance of Oakwood Elementary School, children were pouring out one after another. But Claire and Helen waited for a long time without seeing her daughter, Tanya. Helen's face was etched with worry. She wrung her hands. "What's going on? Why isn't she out yet? I hope nothing has happened." Just as she spoke, they heard a girl crying. Claire and Helen immediately rushed over. Sure enough, they saw Tanya on the ground, crying. In front of her stood a sturdy-looking boy. It was clear he had pushed her down. Helen rushed forward. "Tanya, what happened? Are you bleeding? You scared me to death." The boy turned his head and saw Claire. He blurted out, I saw the maid again, I have to go tell my mom." Claire narrowed her eyes. She hadn't expected such a coincidence, running into his parents yesterday and him today, and the child was still as mischievous as ever. Furious, Helen called a teacher over. But Gavin, the bully, showed no remorse. He shouted, she deserved to be pushed. He even seemed to hold a grudge against Claire, who was standing by. "You bad woman, it's all your fault." The teacher, at a loss, had to ask them to wait for the parents to arrive. Meanwhile, after seeing Claire, Ethan had returned home. Sylvia came up to him and sniffed the air. Her brow furrowed immediately. "Ethan Hawthorne, did you go see Claire? Did you?" He wearily sidestepped her. "Why are you getting so worked up? Worked up? You're asking me why I'm worked up?" Hearing this, Sylvia laughed, even more agitated. "Claire has been gone for 4 years. That means she doesn't want you anymore. But you've refused to marry me all these years. Is it because of her?" Ethan rubbed his temples. "It has nothing to do with her." "Then what is it?" Smelling the faint, unique scent of Claire's perfume on Ethan's clothes, a scent she had smelled once that day, and could never forget, Sylvia became even more frantic. Ethan looked at her hysterical state and thought to himself, doesn't she know the answer? It was because after Claire left, Sylvia had become more and more exhausting. She didn't do any housework and fought with his mother constantly. There was never any peace. Only then did Ethan realize how difficult it was to manage a household, to work hard to prevent conflicts. In the end, it required patience. Claire had never once complained to him about her grievances. How much had she endured in silence? "All right, Gavin is still waiting to be picked up. Let's go." He used this to distract Sylvia, but when they arrived at the school, they were stunned. Sylvia glared resentfully at the well-dressed Claire, cursing under her breath why some people were so hard to get rid of. Especially when Ethan's eyes lit up at the sight of Claire. She saw it all and clenched her fists tightly. "So that's what happened. How do you parents want to handle this?" The teacher explained after recounting the incident. More than one child had confirmed that Gavin had pushed Tanya. When Sylvia saw that the girl's parents were with Claire, that nameless anger flared up again. She scoffed. "How can you believe what children say? For all we know, your daughter tried to push my Gavin, couldn't, and fell down herself." "You!" Helen Thompson was infuriated by her words. "What's your name? Where do you work?" That's an absolutely absurd thing to say. Sylvia rolled her eyes. "What, you think you're some big shot? You want to know where I work so you can retaliate?" Her brazen attitude almost gave Helen a heart attack. Even Ethan couldn't stand it anymore and interjected. "I'm sorry, we didn't manage our son well. I'll have him apologize to you." "Gavin, apologize to the little girl right now." Gavin was reluctant, but Ethan's glare scared him. He mumbled an apology. Helen finally calmed down a little. "So there is a sane person in your family. Are you the boy's father?" "I." Ethan glanced at Claire and saw her feeding the little girl a cookie. The words on the tip of his tongue changed. "No, this is my adopted sister's child." Sylvia, who had been forcefully cut off by Ethan, hadn't had a chance to settle scores with him. When she suddenly heard this sentence, she froze. An unprecedented wave of grievance washed over her. Ethan Hawthorne, her eyes were red, and her chest heaved. When her gaze fell on Claire, she could no longer hold back and lunged at her. "You homewrecker, seducing other people's husbands, I'm going to scratch your face off." Tanya, in Claire's arms, was terrified and flinched. Claire quickly held her and dodged. "Sylvia, if you've lost your mind, go take your medicine. Don't you think you're the most ridiculous one to be saying that? You're insulting me. Who do you think you are? You vixen, enough." Ethan's angry roar put an end to Sylvia's outburst. "Claire is right, you've gone mad. I told you it has nothing to do with her. Why do you keep dragging her into this?" Watching this unfold, Claire sneered internally. A familiar scene. Only this time, her role and Sylvia's were reversed. To a man, even if a woman was once his one true love, once he has her, she becomes like a stale grain of rice on his clothes, tasteless, but a slight bother to discard. "Bad daddy, don't you yell at mommy." Gavin charged at Ethan aggressively. Ethan stopped him, and the boy threw a tantrum, rolling on the ground and wailing. Helen took Tanya from Claire's arms and exchanged a look with her. "This family is so strange." Claire smiled meaningfully but said nothing. Amidst the chaos of Ethan's family, she quietly slipped away. It was Wednesday, the day she had arranged with Director Thompson to scout locations for the new development zone. Claire was ready early and had her driver take her there. They spent the morning inspecting several sites, considering factors like transportation, urban planning, and talent concentration. At noon, they found a small private restaurant for lunch. The director casually mentioned, "I think this area is quite good. We could consider it." After a satisfying meal, the group wandered out. They saw a group of elderly people relaxing in the shade of an old oak tree. The director, intrigued, walked over. The old folks were bored and were the first to strike up a conversation. "Are you officials here on an inspection tour?" The director smiled without answering and asked casually, "Folks, if we were to plan a new district here to boost the economy and technology, what would you think? Would you accept the government's arrangements?" Claire stood quietly to the side. Suddenly, a sharp voice cut through the crowd. "Claire Sterling, you're not dead." She looked up and saw a familiar figure. It was her former mother-in-law, the one who used to order her around. She was right there among the crowd, but her hair was much whiter, and she looked much older, her face even more sour than before. Claire almost didn't recognize her. Martha's interruption successfully diverted the elders' attention from the director's question to Claire. They began to chatter amongst themselves. "Claire, is that your missing daughter-in-law? Didn't you say she was crass and ugly? But looking at her today, she seems so gentle and beautiful." "Ha!" Martha fanned herself, her gaze sweeping venomously over Claire and the men with her. As it happened, they were all men. Her look was instantly accusatory, as if she had caught Claire cheating. "You shameless hussy, you were always restless, always running around outside. A few years away and you haven't changed a bit. Traipsing around with a group of men. Who knows what kind of shady business you're up to?" One of the officials couldn't stand it. He pointed out sternly, "Ma'am, please be mindful of your words and have evidence. We are conducting government business and will not tolerate baseless slander." Her words being challenged only made Martha more agitated. "What are you so nervous about? How dare you threaten me?" She let out a wail and threw herself on the ground. "Oh, everyone, come and see my former daughter-in-law and her lovers are bullying an old woman." Claire watched it all with cold eyes. Finally, she spoke. "Mrs. Hawthorne, I'm only calling you that out of respect for your age. But I have no relationship with you or the Hawthorne family anymore. If you continue to spread these rumors, don't blame me for taking you to the police station." She knew how to hit where it hurt. She continued, "The police station isn't a place for making baseless accusations. If it's confirmed you're spreading lies, you'll be arrested. Then all your grandson's classmates will know he has a grandmother in jail. Do you think your son, Ethan Hawthorne, will still acknowledge you as his mother? You're talking nonsense." Martha's face was flushed with anger, but her voice lacked conviction. She knew that in today's society, you couldn't just say whatever you wanted. It was just that seeing Claire, the daughter-in-law she used to summon at will and crush as she pleased, she had lost control of her tongue. Seeing her waver, Claire didn't press the point. Instead, she brought the conversation back to the director's earlier question, asking it again. This time, before anyone else could answer, Martha shouted, "What new district? We're living here just fine. We don't even know what that thing is, and you want to build it. It will definitely ruin our lives. We don't want it. It was obvious to anyone with eyes that her words were laced with personal resentment. Claire said, "Oh," she deliberately added vaguely, "if the development zone is established, there will be a series of preferential policies. Are you sure you don't want it?" The other elders hesitated, but Martha waved her hand dismissively. "We don't want it. Don't think that just because you've changed your clothes, I don't know who you are. A girl who's barely been to school telling us these things, isn't that laughable? It's just a bunch of nonsense to fool us." By now, several other elders had been swayed by Martha. They began to chime in, "We don't want it." Claire had achieved her goal. She smiled faintly. The following days went on as usual. She didn't run into that detestable family again. One day, she went shopping with Helen Thompson. She heard her complain, "Claire, do you remember that kid who bullied Tanya last time?" Claire paused. "I remember. What happened?" Helen frowned, looking annoyed. "That kid is incorrigible. He started bullying my Tanya again. I went to his house to talk to his mother, and you know what she said." She grew angrier as she spoke. "She told me to look for the problem in my own child. Otherwise, why would her son bully my daughter and not anyone else?" Claire shook her head. "That's just twisting logic. What kind of child can you raise with that attitude?" Helen agreed vehemently. "Exactly, and not only that. It would be terrifying if someone like that had a job, so I did some digging and guess what I found?" Claire noticed a hint of glee in her eyes and raised an eyebrow. It seemed there was more to the story. She then heard her say triumphantly, "Can you believe it? She just bought her way into a position at my husband's department. The paperwork hasn't been finalized yet, so I had one of the junior staff work on something else first. After all, it's the end of the year, things are busy. Making her wait 10 days or half a month, that's normal, right?" Claire chuckled softly. She understood. After Martha had offended her under the oak tree, she had her subordinates snatch several business deals from Ethan. It was a small bit of revenge. After shopping with Helen, she went to her house for dinner. But as soon as she walked in, she met the eyes of a very familiar man. It was Ethan and Sylvia, who had brought gifts to apologize to the Thompsons. Seeing Claire and Helen walk in with bags of shopping, Ethan immediately stood up. He eagerly took the bags from Claire's hands. "Let me." This gesture made Sylvia clench her teeth in secret, but facing the director's wife, whom she had once been so arrogant towards, her spirit faltered. She hadn't known before. That little girl's parents were both influential people. Not to mention Helen Thompson was holding her job application, but the director himself had significant sway in the Brighton City business community. Ethan, now a businessman, couldn't afford to offend them either. So they had no choice but to bring Gavin to apologize. But looking at Gavin, it was clear he was not convinced. All his parents could do was bow a little lower and offer a few more apologies. Gavin, having been severely reprimanded at home and now forced to apologize here, had a flicker of hatred in his young eyes. No one noticed. Claire stayed a little longer after dinner at the Thompsons. The trio from the Hawthorne family had left before the meal. But not long after Claire left, in the dimming light of dusk, she ran into the man who had been waiting for her in a corner outside. His eyes lit up the moment he saw her. He looked like an inexperienced young man. "Claire, are you going to the business networking event in a few days?" Claire didn't answer. With her hands in her pockets, she looked at the man before her with a cold expression. "Ethan Hawthorne, didn't I tell you to stay away from me?" The hopeful light in his eyes immediately dimmed. He seemed to struggle internally for a long time before speaking, his voice filled with pain. "Claire, can't we really start over? Give me a chance. I've changed, I really have. I won't ignore you like I used to. I'll give you the best of everything." Ethan looked at her pleadingly. "Have you forgotten you once said your heart was small, with only room for me?" Claire's lips twitched. "Look at this scumbag, crying and filled with regret. Ethan, you're starting to disgust me." His face turned pale. He stood there as Claire walked past him and left without a single look back. The venue was magnificent, with waiters carrying trays weaving through the crowd. Claire presented her invitation, and someone led her into the main hall. As far as she knew, tonight's business networking event was hosted by Mr. Leo Smith. Many foreign guests were invited, and the format was much more open. Claire casually picked up a glass of wine. To others, she was a vision. A perfectly tailored women's suit accentuated her slender waist. The pencil skirt was flawlessly pressed, exuding an air of sophistication and grace. She wore only simple jewelry, yet each piece was a stunning accent. She was the epitome of feminine charm. The moment Leo Smith saw Claire, he praised her. "Miss Manda, you look absolutely beautiful tonight. May I have the honor of this dance?" "Of course." Claire placed her hand in Leo's outstretched one, and they started the opening dance. Less than 2 minutes in, Leo chuckled. "Miss Manda, you are truly dazzling. The dance has just begun, and I can already feel the covetous gazes of other gentlemen." Claire smiled and looked down, taking it as a playful compliment. But she liked the word dazzling. To think that she was once the frumpy wife someone didn't even want to be seen with. She could only be described as humble and insignificant, with no life or voice of her own. Now, the chores of the kitchen, the tedious housework, were far behind her. Sometimes, when Claire looked at herself in the mirror, she felt that the term reborn was a perfect description. Not far away, Ethan watched Claire dance with Leo, his eyes filled with jealousy. He didn't even move when someone bumped into him, his gaze fixed. That dazzling woman had once been his. It was he who hadn't known how to cherish her. At this thought, Ethan took a harsh swig of his drink. The strong alcohol burned his throat, and his eyes reddened, but it eased the pain in his heart just a little. It was called a business networking event, but it was more of a straightforward exchange of interests. In just an hour, Claire had secured 2 more partnerships and a new transportation line. Even Director Thompson congratulated her. "Claire, you're a woman who is no less capable than any man, but please keep an eye out for me. If you hear of any skilled technical professionals, the development zone needs them." Claire raised her glass to him and agreed. Just then, someone approached and whispered something in the director's ear. His face turned pale. He had to leave immediately, without waiting for the event to end. "What happened?" Claire asked urgently. He slapped his hand in frustration. "Tanya is missing. They've been looking for her all day." "What?" Claire's brows furrowed. She immediately decided to leave as well, to help the director find his daughter. It was evening, and darkness was falling. When they arrived at Oakwood Elementary, teachers and Tanya's mother and grandparents were all searching the area. One teacher muttered to himself as he searched, "How did she suddenly disappear? I've taught them all that there are kidnappers around lately and that they shouldn't go into empty alleyways by themselves. How could she have gone missing? Claire, what's going on?" She turned to see that Ethan had followed her. But this was an emergency. She had no time for old grudges and told him the truth. "Tanya is missing." "A child is missing?" Ethan was surprised for a moment, then joined the search party. At a time like this, one more person meant one more glimmer of hope. His own son, Gavin, also attended this school, so he could understand their fear. Thinking of Gavin, Claire suddenly stopped. She remembered the image of him with the shovel from the day of the earthquake. There was no direct connection, just a faint intuition. She grabbed a searching teacher and asked, "Did anyone see who Tanya was with last?" The teacher shook his head regretfully. "We only saw Tanya leave by herself after school." By herself? Claire was once again at a loss. She tried asking the system where the child was, but finding a child wasn't related to business and Tanya wasn't the host. The system couldn't answer. Just then, someone ran over with a piece of paper. "We found something new," someone wrote a note telling Tanya to wait for a classmate in the alley after school. The handwriting was clumsy and crooked. It was clearly a child's writing. Tanya's homeroom teacher took one look at it and his world collapsed. He squeezed out a strained whisper. "This handwriting, it's Gavin's." What Helen couldn't handle the news. Her legs gave out and she almost fainted, but Claire caught her. "I knew that Gavin was no good, that he would bully our Tanya again. But how could he be so cruel? To have Tanya kidnapped like this. If anything happens to Tanya, I don't want to live either." Ethan had turned pale the moment he heard Gavin's name. When Sylvia, who was at home, was told to bring Gavin to the school, she shrieked, "Impossible, that's impossible. How could my Gavin do something like that?" "You're framing him, aren't you?" Gavin didn't yet understand the gravity of the situation. After a few questions, he admitted it. "It's her fault. She made Mom and Dad mad at me. If she disappeared, I wouldn't get grounded or have my snacks taken away." His words were innocent, yet chillingly cruel. A shiver went down the spines of all the adults present. Helen Thompson leaned against Claire, reeling from one blow after another. She still managed to say, "How can a child have such a wicked mind? It must be your parenting that's the problem. If my Tanya doesn't come back, I'll make you regret it." The police arrived. Everyone was searching for the missing Tanya, but Claire noticed something that seemed unrelated but slightly odd. Sylvia had been searching normally, but when she turned a corner, she seemed to see someone and quickly recoiled, trying hard to compose herself, looking utterly terrified. Claire paid closer attention. She saw an ordinary mother and son. They didn't seem to be from around here. The man was complaining to his mother. "There you go again. You hear one vague tip, and you drag me all the way out here. That woman is so good at hiding. She and your grandson are probably long gone." Claire frowned, not understanding why Sylvia had hidden. But in the next moment, things took a sharp turn. The pair suddenly spotted Gavin. The man immediately shouted, "Mom, look, doesn't that kid look like him?" Sylvia turned pale, grabbed Gavin, and tried to run. But her action only drew their attention, allowing them to recognize her. Sylvia, the shout was filled with years of resentment. Sylvia, hearing her name, trembled violently. The crowd was confused. They thought that just after one child went missing, someone else was trying to snatch another. These kidnappers were getting bold. The two ran towards Sylvia. Just as people were about to help her, they witnessed a horrifying scene. "Look out!" Sylvia was pulling Gavin, trying to escape quickly, but she didn't notice the car speeding down the road. Gavin, being small, was a step too slow. He was grazed by the car and sent flying. Ethan felt his heart stop. He rushed over to carefully check on Gavin, afraid to touch him. He could only roar at Sylvia. "Why were you running with the child like that?" Sylvia seemed to be in a daze. She stared at Gavin lying on the ground, her mind blank in the face of Ethan's accusations. No one could have predicted this sudden accident. In the end, Ethan carried Gavin to the hospital. The rest continued to search for the abducted Tanya. Because the alarm had been raised relatively early, the police had set up emergency blockades at the bus and train stations, keeping a close watch. Any suspicious individuals with suspicious items were immediately inspected. Other officers were systematically checking places that could be used as hideouts by traffickers. Finally, in the middle of the night, they found Tanya, abandoned on the side of the road. Because the stations were tightly sealed, the kidnapper couldn't escape with a child and had left her behind. Tanya was frightened but physically unharmed. The moment she saw her parents, she burst into tears. "Mommy, I was scared." Tanya had been tied up. When they untied her, there were red marks on her wrists, but it was a miracle amidst the misfortune. Claire could finally go home and get some sleep. However, for some, it was destined to be a sleepless night. Gavin was taken to the hospital after the accident, but during the blood transfusion, Ethan was stunned. "You're saying the child has type A blood, but we are both type B?" Sylvia had been silent ever since witnessing the accident, as if in a trance. The mother and son who had followed them interrupted him. "Hurry up and sign. Don't delay my grandson's treatment." "Your grandson?" Ethan felt as if he had heard something absurd. He watched as Gavin was wheeled into the operating room, a feeling that something was spiraling out of his control. Meanwhile, the mother and son, having finally found Sylvia and Gavin only to have the child get into an accident, relentlessly cursed at Sylvia in the hospital, venting their frustration. "You hussy, you not only drove your own husband to his grave, but you had the nerve to run off with the only heir of the Kane family. Did you ask your late husband for permission? You'd make the dead rise from their graves with anger. Mom, calm down. We found the boy, right? Let's just pray he'll be okay. Once he's better, we'll take him home." Sylvia was in no state to process any of this. The accusations went in one ear and out the other. But Ethan, standing beside them, felt his world collapse. Gavin was not his son, and Sylvia hadn't been kicked out of her home. She had run away. The amount of information was overwhelming. He couldn't process it all at once. The next day, Claire was up early and went to the office as usual. The system had given her many special abilities, but it couldn't do her work for her. She still had to put in the effort. Yesterday's events had given her an idea. Child trafficking was rampant in this era, but there was a lack of education on how to deal with it. Coincidentally, Radiance Inc. had recently ventured into film investment. Claire planned to use yesterday's incident as inspiration to produce an educational film. It would subtly teach the public how to identify and prevent kidnappings. It would be her small contribution to this era. The heart-wrenching sorrow she had seen in Helen when Tanya went missing was something even she, a woman without children, couldn't bear to witness. It was too agonizing. Later, Claire picked up some fruit and pastries and took some time to visit the Thompsons. She asked about the results of the police investigation. It was a frustrating situation. Gavin, being a child himself, had lured another child into an alley known for trafficking, leading to her abduction. But he couldn't be held legally responsible. All they could do was give him a talking to. As the victim's parents, there was nothing they could do. After all, their child had been found, unharmed. The perpetrator, meanwhile, was now lying in a hospital bed due to an accident. All they could do now was teach their own child to be wary of those with ill intentions. That night, Claire worked on documents until 11. There were security guards in the building, so she felt relatively safe. However, bumping into someone suddenly still gave her a scare. When she saw the disheveled man before her, she had to restrain herself from rolling her eyes. She had told him not to come looking for her again, but he just didn't seem to understand. "Claire," his voice was hoarse and raw, as if he hadn't had a drink of water in weeks. "I think I was wrong from the very beginning." Ethan looked up, and only then did Claire notice his eyes were bloodshot, redder than if he hadn't slept for 3 days. He looked completely broken, like a homeless man on the street. But despite being awake, it felt as though Ethan had just woken from a long dream. In the dream, he was the successful director of the research institute. Claire was still his wife, and she was pregnant. Soon, they would have a child of their own. But he hadn't cherished it. In the dead of winter, he had ignored her, letting her wash the entire family's laundry in the freezing cold. In the end, the child was lost, and he had immediately asked for a divorce. The man in the dream was so foolish, such a bastard. Even just witnessing it, he couldn't forgive himself. Claire had just suffered a miscarriage, yet he showed no pity or guilt. He had abandoned her heartlessly. The deep despair on her face at that moment seemed to be seared into his mind now, impossible to erase. It made him want to slap himself. An extreme self-loathing formed a kind of strength, propping up the man who was now like a walking corpse, bringing him before Claire. He wanted to say to her from the bottom of his heart, "Claire, I'm sorry, I'm a bastard, I'm so sorry." Seeing Ethan crying and slapping himself in front of her, Claire let out a breath. She couldn't quite describe the feeling. The woman who had lost her child and been abandoned on that cold winter night had finally received a long overdue apology in this life. However, she had no intention of forgiving him. So she only said calmly, disappear from my sight." From now on, they would be strangers, never to appear in each other's lives again. That would be for the best. From that day on, Ethan Hawthorne disappeared from Claire Sterling's life. He returned to the hospital to find Sylvia gone. When he asked the mother and son, they said contemptuously, "She was faking it yesterday. Now she's run off. That woman is always pulling little tricks like that." Ethan clenched his fists until his nails dug into his palms, drawing blood. Sylvia? It was all because Sylvia had lied to him. She had used the fact that she saved his life to manipulate him, to lead him step by step into his current situation. It was all because of this woman the pent-up frustration, self-loathing, and regret grew until he found an outlet. He had to find Sylvia. He searched the area around the hospital, but she wasn't there. He checked the nearby alleyways and lanes, but she wasn't there either. It wasn't until he got home that he caught Sylvia, who had just finished packing her bags and was about to flee. The moment she saw the ferocious expression on Ethan's face, she screamed in terror. The packed luggage and her scream triggered him. "You dare to run? After ruining me like this, you dare to run? No, don't come near me." Ethan, by the time reason returned to Ethan's mind, his hands were covered in blood. With a clatter, he dropped the knife in panic, looking at the chaos around him. Only then did he realize what he had done. Sylvia's voice was now faint. "Help me." A week later, Claire learned that Ethan had been jailed for stabbing Sylvia 5 times. If not for prompt medical attention, she would likely have bled to death. But even though she was saved, some of the wounds were deep and had damaged her internal organs. She would never fully recover. Claire shook her head. She knew the news, and that was it. Those people were not worth any more of her attention. She looked down at the collaboration contract for the construction of the economic development zone in her hands, and a genuine smile finally appeared on her face. The location for the development zone had been decided. It wasn't the place where she had run into her former mother-in-law. Without Claire needing to spread any rumors, word had already gotten around in that neighborhood. The officials had originally considered their area. But a crass old woman had ruined it. She had left a very bad impression on the officials, so they had ultimately chosen another location. The preferential policies naturally went to someone else. As for the crass old woman, it was her former mother-in-law. She had become infamous in her area. Everyone, whether they knew her or not, would spit in her direction and curse her. They blamed her for ruining their community's good fortune. But in reality, the decision had nothing to do with what happened that day. Claire had just taken a gamble, wanting to teach her a lesson. If it didn't work out, it didn't matter. But now, it had actually come true. At the end of the year, a favorable policy wind blew, and Radiance Inc., led by Claire, began a deep collaboration with the government. Building on their current business model, they not only developed the economy, but also cultivated a series of technical talents. Claire's business empire took a giant leap forward. She poured all her energy into her business. Until her 34th birthday, she had not married. But she was renowned, recognized as a conscientious and charitable entrepreneur. After the release of the educational film she invested in, Claire had embarked on a path of education and philanthropy. She donated money and supplies to children in multiple impoverished areas, focusing on both education and charity. One day, Claire had just finished a charity gala. At the event, she had donated a piece of jewelry worth $1 million to raise funds for the education of children in a mountain village. As she was leaving the hall to get into her car, she saw a few homeless people nearby. One of them looked vaguely familiar. Claire had long mastered the art of keeping a straight face. She pretended not to see anything and got into her car as usual. The car sped away, leaving the dust and noise of the street behind. After the car had gone, a filthy man, his features almost unrecognizable and his hair unkempt, dared to follow the vehicle with his eyes until it disappeared. He smiled bitterly to himself, a sour and unbearable feeling in his heart. The way he looked now, she probably wouldn't recognize him even if they met face to face. But seeing that she was doing well was enough. He murmured to himself, "May the rest of your life be filled with joy and happiness, free from illness and disaster."